I'm not sure if you can hear me.
All right, Rue, I just rebooted a year here. I don't see Thalia, but can you hear me okay or not?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, now it worked. Excellent. All right, I'm gonna get started then. I hope we get Thalia back. I hope she saw the note. Well, we'll find out, okay?
Yep.
I'm gonna share my screen and turn on the overhead projector, which I never forget to do. I just forgot. All right, so what I said before that you missed was that there's a reason why I put the jobs notice on the home page, even though it's a first level class in AutoCAD. And I said that if people do the job in this class correctly, and that means you have to in order to get a grade, then you understand the software well enough to be used to be able to get a job. I also mentioned, without naming the person, that somebody in this class had been offered a job using AutoCAD and was offered a job based entirely on what he learned in this class. And so it isn't something that is impossible by any means. So um, anyway, that's the reason why I have this posted. So what I've been doing is putting up the jobs that have come in. And this one in Huntington, and these happen to be most of the ones I post are companies that have hired people before from here. And that's why they've come back. So the person who got a job, I want to name that person, although that person might want to mention it. I don't know. Can I mention it? Barth is going to start next week at Sebago Technics. They're going to place him at, yeah, I know it's impressive. But here's the thing, Barth is really good with this software. Well, so are you. You know what I mean? So he was in a position where he had time to do a part-time job, and it's 20 hours a week, right? Yeah. The point though is this: don't sell yourself short. The more work experience you get while you're in school, the better. And one of the things, thanks to Barth, that we are going to start doing is creating an internship that's optional, but that gives people 3 technical elective credits toward the degree. So, and that we're doing for a number of reasons, but it just made a lot of sense. If somebody can work while they're here and get some experience, that doesn't necessarily mean they cover the same thing at work that we would cover in our classes. So for instance, you get a job someplace and the chances of that job covering everything we do in the CAD graphics, I mean the CAD applications class, are almost zero because we cover so many things in that class. So in that class, you'll do civil drawings, you'll do structural drawings, you'll do mechanical drawings, you do architectural drawings. Normally at a job, you only do one of those things. So, but we do have technical electives in our program, and you have to take 2 of them. And those electives can be in any program on campus that's related and has a graphics component. And now, thanks to Barth, we're going to set it up so you can also get a job and have that be a technical elective. Just one technical elective, though. Okay, Thalia, you're back. If you can hear me, let me know. Yeah, unmuted, so I think that means you heard me. Can you hear me? Ah, okay, excellent. All right, so we got the Zoom thing worked out. This is how you fix computers. You reboot the computer, and then you try it again. And if that doesn't work, you do something else. All right, so I did have a question here under assignments, and I want to just show you. I gave you a final exam review sheet. You're going to have a final exam. I haven't posted it yet. You can see this is my setup, so it's hidden. In fact, I haven't even finished putting it together yet, but it'll be similar to the one that is in the review sheet. Excuse me, the review sheet is a past exam. I'm going to redo that though and make a few changes, but I did have some questions on it. Before I get to that though, I want to know if anybody has any questions about the last assignment, the one involving primary auxiliary, secondary auxiliary, or civil. Yes. When you went to submit to insert the what? Oh, the barn. Yeah. that point is in reference to something on the drawing itself. It's not an absolute coordinate. Okay, let me open that. I'll show you what the question is, folks, but first I'm going to open up the assignment and show you what the question was. This was about the site plan. Let me open that first. All right, so this is the optional assignment. Well, optional, you have a choice on it. And so the question is, where do you place this? And all these dimensions are given from the edge of the property line, right? They're given from the edge of the property line up. One of the things you might not have realized looking at this, the barn right here, it's got a dimension from this edge. That means that that right there has to line up with this. So it's not horizontal. That makes sense? So the way you would place that in there, what I would do is take that piece of the property line, offset it 45.11. That'll give you the bottom edge of the barn. Then starting at A, you're going to go over 2.71, and make sure you start at the beginning at A and not at the end of the whole thing, because there is a little gap there, right? So if you start there and just go over, and in fact, you could draw a line from the end of that property line up and then offset at 2.71. That'll give you that corner right there. And now everything else has to be done. Tell you what, let me quickly do that one as a review, and then I'll show you how I would set that up for the barn. Okay. So let's start AutoCAD. Right. Oh, I see. I see. You're talking about right here. Got it. It doesn't, huh? Let me just see something here. Oh, it is off 10. That's a mistake. Boy, am I glad you found that. That's a 10. That's what was plus that. And that's up 10. Yeah. You know what? I see what you're saying. And that is because there's an error here. That should be a 5, right? So anybody else is doing this, Sarah just found an error here. If you take a look at this, that's 45.11 going up here, right? So it tells you to start it at 55.11 now, which is because that corner right there originally was at 10. All right. What I actually would like to do on this one is really just get rid of that altogether. And then you just use the dimensions themselves to place it. So, but given that I said that, let me go on and do it that way. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna modify this, and I'll change that right now on the assignment. And Jansen, would you close the door for me? Make sure that that's unlocked. If it isn't, I'll go and unlock it. I just a little distracting. Is it on the outside? Can you open it? Don't close it first. Hang on, folks. Actually, what I was expecting you to do was this, not lock yourself out. But we got you back in. I just want to make sure other people can come in. Here we go. Now people can get in, but I won't be as distracted. All right, let me show you what I was talking about with this. And then we'll go through the, if there are any other questions, I'll answer those, and then we'll go through the final exam. So I have AutoCAD here. I'm going to start a new drawing. And this one's going to be acad.dwt. Come back out here, bring that over to there. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is to change my units. I'm going to change the units in AutoCAD so that they're going to be decimal, and I'll leave the precision set the way it is, but I need surveyor's units over here, and I want to set the precision to degrees, minutes, and seconds. So we do that. Now I'll do my polyline, and it tells you to start that at 275 and 10. So when it asks for the starting point, I'm going to type in 275 and 10 like that. Zoom back out a little bit so I can see, because that's quite a ways away now. I got to zoom out before I start. All right. Polyline, start point 275, 10. Here we go. All right, so now if I look at the property line, I'm going to do this with the relative coordinates, so the @ symbol, and then in this case 110, comma, I mean at an angle of, so 110 at an angle of north, 24, the letter D for degrees, 48 minutes, 18 seconds west. Oh, I had a typing error here. I put the apostrophe instead, so I need to just do it again. So it's a good idea to take a look at what you just typed before you go on from there. So at north, 48 D for degrees, 18 minutes. Whoop, 24 degrees. The letter D, 48 minutes, and then 18, and 18 has to be seconds. So you need to have the quotation mark on that, and then W, then it draws my line at in the angle that I want. Now at 83.33 at an angle of north, 50 degrees, 16 minutes, 49 seconds east. Looks like that. At 93.44 and an angle of south, 37 degrees, 35 minutes, 18 seconds east. At 81.45 feet. You notice I'm not putting the foot mark in there. At an angle of south, 14 degrees, 34 minutes, 23 seconds west. And then don't go and snap to the end of the beginning. Everybody remembers that because this is a survey. There's going to be a little gap there. So at 54.43 at an angle of south, 89 degrees, 45 seconds, 45 minutes, 31 seconds west. And then when you look in here, one of the questions is how big is that gap? So you're just going to use the distance command to find out the size of that gap. All right, now as far as doing the rest of the house here, if you take a look, this is all a polyline. So I can't offset that without just offsetting everything, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to go 45.11. I offset the whole thing and it goes all the way in here. So that's not going to work for me. But if I explode the polyline, exploding turns it into individual lines. So now I can offset it 45.11 and bring that up. And there's the bottom of my barn right there. Make sense? Now, before I said, if I draw a line from the end point of this, and let me point something out here. Anybody with me here? Luke, yeah? I'm going to draw a line from the end point of that line. People tend to go right on the end point, but you notice there are two end points within that square. I don't know which one I'm getting right now. So when you're drawing, if you want to be accurate, go to the endpoint by just going to one side or the other of the midpoint of a line, because right now I have a running object snap for midpoint. If I closer to the midpoint than the endpoint, that's the one it finds. When I come down here, that's the endpoint. I don't have to be on it. I can see it's the endpoint because it's got that little square. So now I'm drawing from the end. If I go straight up on this, now from there, I'm going to offset 2.71, and that's just going to give me the corner right there of the barn. So now I'll get rid of that. I'm going to use the fillet command to make a square corner here. So there's the corner right here. Now everything else I'm going to do, I'm going to offset 30, make that go 30 up like this. Now that gives me the top of the barn and the side of the barn. I know that's the beginning of the barn right there. I'm going to draw a line that goes from here to here. Now the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure that that angle between those two right there, I want to make sure that's 90 degrees. But because the line that I started with was not perfectly straight, right? It wasn't exactly 90. That means it's not going to be exactly 90 if I use that original line. So by offsetting these two, I know those points line right up. When I connect the two endpoints, then that line is going to be 90 degrees to my starting line. And that's even if, when I put that angle on just to see what it looks like, even if I say, let's change the precision on that and let's put it up a little higher, right out to 8 decimal places, it's still 90 degrees. Now, I'm going to offset 50. Oh, I put the foot mark in. Offset 50, and now all I have to do is clean the ends up here, and I can do that by trimming, or I can do that with a fillet command, as long as the radius is set to 0, and that's what it's set for by default. That's how I clean up corners all the time when I'm drawing using the fillet command. So Barth, when you're doing your job and you need a clean corner, that's the safest way to do it because it'll extend lines or it'll trim them automatically for you. Now, before I did that, if the fillet, the last time I did a fillet, if I had it set to something like 10, now I can't use the fillet command to make a sharp corner because it wants to do that unless I hold down the shift key. If I hold the shift key down while filleting, it'll give me a sharp corner because people do it so much. It's a really useful tool. So that's how I would place that barn in there. That makes sense, Sarah? Okay. And then you go ahead and answer the questions from there. Anything else on the auxiliary views or the site plan? Anybody in here? Anybody at home? Sarah? Yes, Sarah, I apologize because you know I have a hearing problem. I didn't quite get that. Is there, which one of the parts are we talking about? This is on the exam? Oh, on the exam. Okay, I thought you were talking about this. Okay. So on the exam, so are we done with the last assignment, right? Everybody's happy with the last assignment? And again, you can do all of them if you want. Of course, that's what I would do because I'm a geek, but you don't have to do all of them. You have a choice there. But if it's something where you're really interested in civil, I want you to do the civil one. Just so you make sure you understand how that works. But again, especially, like I said, we've got somebody who's now getting a job doing this. Well, you get a job doing this, you got to really take that seriously. So it might be helpful just to go through and do the other ones as well, just to get that kind of practice. I think what you're likely to be doing is going to be schematics and layouts. They're going to give you sketches and have you make modifications. Did they show you what they were doing? Did they ask you to demonstrate that you could use AutoCAD? They didn't. They just assumed you could. See, that's because he's coming from here. They wouldn't have done that, I don't think. I mean, I know Sebago Technics, they've hired a lot of people from here. They just assume, well, if he's in that class, he must know what he's doing. So they could easily get burned if they hired somebody else, because we've seen some work from people from other places that is not very good work. But all right, let's go back and take a look then at the final exam. It's the final exam review sheet, I should say. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the Microsoft Word version of this instead of the other one, so I can, I can type inside it as we go through if you have any questions about it. By the way, if I give you something in the document file format, the DOC or the DOCX, that's a Microsoft Word file, but you can go to the window at the bottom, you can open something called WordPad, and WordPad will open a doc file. So I could have gone here and opened this. I'm going to just check and make sure that's still true. So we're going to call it a DLC file right there. I'm using it already in something else. That's why it won't open, but it looks like it would. Let me just make sure. I want to make sure before I tell you that it will, that it does. So let me open it there. Yeah, so you can see that's exactly the same file. So you don't need to own Microsoft Word. You don't have to have it installed in your computer. If you've got Windows, WordPad is an application that comes with Windows. And it doesn't support everything, so it's quite possible. Yeah, you see, it does mess up a little bit here. You might have to go back and say, well, circle. Okay, that's what it's saying. Arc. Those are the commands. So WordPad will open it, but that doesn't mean it'll open it entirely accurately. So let's open this up with Word. But you have it in two forms. You got a PDF file and you also have a doc file. If you want with a PDF file, you can print it out and handwrite it, or you can, if you have a way of typing into a PDF file, you can do it that way, or you can open up the other one. So the question you had was about the last drawing. Was that this one right here? Okay, and what is your question? Yeah, okay. Well, here's the thing about an auxiliary view. If you take a look at this part, and I show you what it looks like over here, this has an angled surface. There's a hole that is 90 degrees to that surface. In other words, it goes straight down through at 90 degrees. The only place to show that hole in true shape is if you were looking straight down at the surface, right? So on this particular assignment, all you've got to do is set this up. And really the offset command really is your best friend when it comes to auxiliary views. And it's, no matter what the auxiliary view is, the chances are really good that you're going to be able to generate what you need using the offset command. I'm going to start a new drawing. This drawing is in inches, so we'll do that. If I draw the front view on this, I just come over 2.8, and I would come up the height of this, which is 0.94. And then I'm going to have an angle, and the angle is 45 degrees. So I could go down and set my polar tracking so that it only goes 90 or 45. So there's my 45-degree angle. I don't know what the actual length is, so I'm just going to draw it longer than it needs to be. Doesn't even matter. You can draw it shorter than it needs to be or longer, because the fillet command will clean it up for you when you're all done. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go straight up on that. If I go straight up on that, it goes up 2.4. Straight up. 2.44. Now I'm going to come over. So if I come over here like that, that's that corner right there. That makes sense? Now, if I take a look at this, I also know that 0.84 over from there. So I'm going to hover over this, go to the left, I go to the right and type in 0.8. From here, I go down at 45 degrees and I get that. So then I'm going to trim this all up. Now it's that 45-degree angle that causes the necessity for an auxiliary view. So if I offset, and I'm just going to offset this so that there's 2 inches in between. If I bring that up here like that, and then offset once again the width of this, and the width of this is 2. Bring that up like that. That is what it looks like if I'm up here looking straight down at that surface, 90 degrees to that surface. Make sense? Now I just have to go in and clean this up like this. Now, where is that hole? That hole is centered. It's 1 inch above. So I'm going to offset 1 and bring that up. It's 1 inch above the bottom and happens to also be 1 inch over from here. So the center of the circle is going to go right there. The diameter is 1.5. That's my auxiliary view on that particular part. Okay, if it has an arm coming down, so whatever you have for an angle, draw the line representing the angle and then offset it. That's a primary auxiliary view. There's no secondary on this one. You're going to have a different thing to draw, but I'm not going to give you a secondary auxiliary view. It would be a primary auxiliary view. All right, make sense? Everybody else make sense? This is really no different than doing a right side view or a left side view. You're still projecting, but normally if you're doing a right side view, hang on. I'm just going to put an arrow pointing at this. So the width of 0 to start off with, and the width to end would be like right here. Hang on just a minute. Width, starting with 0, ending with some other number other than 0. So there's my arrow. So if you're looking from that point of view, which is how a right side view is set up, that's 90 degrees to that surface right there. So it's exactly the same thing, except that it's not a surface that is already orthographically in one of the 6 principal planes. Okay, make sense, folks? Yes? Ru, Thalia, make sense? Yes? Getting no response, I'm going to assume it makes sense. All right, now if we go back to the exam, the question that Ernest had to do with the M-line command. I don't, where is the M-line? What question was that? Do you remember? I can find it. All I have to do is Control F, M-line. There it is, question 34, okay? It says if you use the M-line to draw a floor plan, what setting controls the distance between the M-lines? There may be questions on this exam about commands that I've never covered. I think that's perfectly legitimate. Your job is to say, I don't know, and you try it out. So any command that, any question that asks you something that you're not sure of, whether you've been exposed to it or not, but if you're not sure of it, try it. Take a look, see what it does. Don't just assume you know what the answer is. But in this case, since Ernest asked about it, let's talk about the M-line command. So I'm going to start a new file. I'm going to also start this with the ACAD. And let's just say I wanted to do a floor plan. So I go to my units and I'm going to set the units so they're architectural. And I'll make the limits big enough for a house. So 40 feet by 30 feet. So now what I want to do is I want to draw something like a foundation. So I'm going to go to the M-line command. Invalid point. Oh, I picked architecture, but I never picked OK. I got a little ahead of myself there. All right, now I'm changing my limit just so that they're bigger than they start off being. I'm going to go to 40 feet and 30 feet. Then I'm going to do a zoom all. Now I'm going to use the M-line command, and I'm just going to start some random place. And as I draw, I'm getting 2 lines, all right? But if you look at the options when I start, I've got style, scale, justification. Those are my 3 options. Well, justification on this is currently set to top, which means as I draw this, the top line is where I'm going to be selecting my points. If I had changed justification, justification could also be 0. Now, if it's 0, I'm going in the middle between the 2 lines. Make sense? If I go back and say bottom, now I'm using the bottom as my insertion point. That makes sense? Now, if I go in here and say scale, and this is how I would, if I were you, how I would check this out. If I change that to 2, now it's twice as wide. Well, if I put it in there, and then I try to do a distance, and I do a distance from here to here, the distance is 2 inches. So by default, 1 means 1 unit, right? All right, now let's go back and see the next one. And the next one is style. So if I pick style, it's going to say, yeah, you don't have any choices, because if you take the question mark, and whenever you get a command that has a question mark in it, it's saying this will give you a list of the possible answers. If I do that, there's only one style, and it's called standard. Well, that should tell you that like dimension styles or text styles or table styles, there's something called an M-line style. So I don't have any idea how to do that. I'm just going to start typing M-line and see if M-line style comes up. Doesn't seem to come up. How about M style? That doesn't seem to come up either. So where is the M-line style command? How do I change it? I don't know. What are you going to do? You know what you're going to do. You're going to Google it. You're going to go out and you're going to say something like M-line style AutoCAD. And it comes up. It says, okay, search for M-line style. To create an M-line style right there, you pick it. And it says at the command prompt, enter ML style. This all making sense? This is just a strategy for dealing with stuff that's new. And again, on the job bar, when you're doing this, something comes up, you're going, I don't know that. Don't run and ask somebody immediately. Try to figure it out, right? Yes. Autodesk is the name of the company that produces or manufactures AutoCAD. The original company produced one product, AutoCAD. Now they produce hundreds of products. Revit is an Autodesk product, something called Navisworks, which I'm going to be using on Friday. I'm doing some training at Bath Iron Works on Friday morning. That's one of the things I'm going to show them. They have a program called Recap, where you take photographs, upload them, and it'll make supposedly a 3D model. Autodesk has a civil 3D program. They got a mechanical design. So they have dozens of different software programs. So when you went and signed up to download AutoCAD, if you did it, you went to the Autodesk website. And when you get to the Autodesk website, it'll show you the various pieces of software that Autodesk sells. And that's what they are right there. Okay. So as a student, you can download any of those. But you notice there are some very, very targeted programs. Robot Structural Analysis Professional. In other words, you put together a robot and say, if I make this robot work, where are the stresses going to be? That's very sophisticated software. Structural bridge design, very specific, obviously. Vehicle tracking, all these things are programs that they produce. Their moneymaker is still AutoCAD, and there are 2 versions of that, AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT. So you got AutoCAD LT, AutoCAD for the Mac. AutoCAD, AutoCAD Web, AutoCAD for the Mac. Fusion 3D 360 is a parametric modeling program. Inventor is a program that's similar to SolidWorks. So in other words, Autodesk is the company that makes these things. AutoCAD is one of the things they make. Make sense? So now I say, oh, ML style. Well, I guess that makes sense. Although, you know, I would have called it M-line style if it were up to me. So ML, I type the ML and sure enough, ML style shows up right there. So now I want to make a new style. Everybody with me on this? I'm going to make a new style. I'm going to call this one foundation. Continue. Now what I can do is add lines to this. You know, I can say, well, right now I've got an offset of 0.5 and an offset of negative 0.5. That gives me the 1 in between. That's what I want to keep, because if it starts out being 1, now, remember when I showed you the little block for the X in it and I said make it 1 by 1, and now you bring it in and you can bring it in whatever scale you want. I'm going to do the same thing here. So if I want that spacing between there on a foundation to be 10 inches, I just make the scale 10 and now it's 10 inches. Make sense? But I am going to add some lines. So I add another line. Right now the offset in that line is 0. What I want to do is indicate that the offset has to be something else. So what I'm going to do is make the offset on that one. What I want is to have, what I'm doing is making a line, an M line, that'll give me a foundation and the footing, okay? The footing is twice the width of the foundation. So twice the width of the foundation means the entire thing is going to be a width of 2. Make sense? So now in this case, instead of an offset of 0.5, I'm going to make an offset of 1. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and change the color to something else, and I'm going to change the line type to something else as well. And for that, I have to load a line type. What I'm going to load is the old familiar line type that you know and love, hidden to, right there. So now I've got 3 lines. One of them is going to be hidden and green. The other one's going to be solid and 0.5. And the other thing I might want to do here, no, I'll leave it at that. Now, if I do an offset and add one more, this one I'm going to do an offset of -1. I'm going to do an offset of -1, which is right here. And that one, once again, actually, you know what? Instead of the line, the layer, I'm going to change the layer. So has, you know, color right here is by layer. Can I put this on a different layer? I thought I could. No. All right. They should make this so you can put the lines on different layers. I'll make the color green again. And once again, I'll make the line type hidden too. Now that is now a style called foundation. I'm going to set it current. So now if I go out there to the M line command now, and I start drawing, you see what it's doing? So it's drawing this out. And if I change my scale to something architectural like a 1/4 inch, now when I draw the M line and I bring it out, the hidden line segments get larger because they're going to be set up for the foundation. All right. Now, if we take a look at this, right now it's set up so it runs along the bottom. When I go to M line, now I'm going to say I want the scale to be 10. I want a 10-inch foundation wall. And the justification, well, unfortunately, justification, you only have 3 choices: top, bottom, or 0. So I'm going to go to bottom. That'll give me the outside of the foundation wall. So you see, I can go like this. I could say, let's go 40 feet. Zoom out and go up. And you see what it's doing is it's making all the corners for me. And then I could go up 30 feet. And I go over here another 40 feet. And then I could close it up. So it gives me a way of drawing and having all the corners cleaned up at the same time. This might actually be very useful to you in that job you're about to do. And I don't use it very often. To me, it's easy to just draw a rectangle, put them on the right layer and do it that way. But that's how the M-line command works. And again, don't be hesitant to just say, I don't know how that works, and just try something and then look it over. The only thing, again, you might run into is, I don't know how to change the style. You type something that makes sense, like M-line style, which would make sense. It doesn't work. You go and you do a search online, do a Google search. There's also is a help system here. And that used to be very helpful, but the Google search is a lot quicker than going to the help system. So um, the other thing is MLine has some other things going on as well, where you can say, I want to snap to here and go here. And then you go ML edit. And ML edit allows you to say, gee, I want this to be an open T between here and here. And when you do that, it does a break like that. See what it just did? Now I can do an open T and then pick this one and this one. Now, what it should have done is taken and done a break right there, but it doesn't. It just does the outside. These are when I'm saying there's limitations to this. To me, this has never been all that useful a command because normally I can do something else. But here's one place where it would be useful. Suppose you had a wiring, like a wiring diagram, like 16 wires that all had to go together, right? And that sometimes happens when you're doing the kind of stuff you're doing. If I had an M-line style and I made a new style, and I'm just going to call this 16, continue. Now, let me start with standard. If I say I want to add another line, and I say I want that one to be offset 1, and then I go and add another line, and I want that to be offset 1.5, and then I add another line, and I want that to be offset 2, and then I add another line, and I want that to be offset 2.5, do another one, and I want that to be offset 3. Now I go in the other direction, so I do another one and offset that one -1. I think you see where I'm headed with this. That's why I don't need to do all 16. But now the beauty of this is a lot of times you have these wiring diagrams. You can still see it up there. I can't see it here. Something changed. I'm going to have to look at the overhead on this one now. This is black screen to me. All kinds of problems today. If I go into the M-line command now and I look for style and I look for style, which is ST. Actually, Rue, can you still see when I'm sharing my screen? Can you still see it? Rue? Yes? No? Talia? Okay, the style, I made the style called 16. So now as I start drawing, as you can probably imagine, I'm getting as many lines as I created here. But you see what it does? It does all the trimming for me and cleans up the corners, no matter what they are. So there are situations where you have multiple parallel lines you need to draw and you know what the spacing between them is. This actually can become a useful command then. Ah, came back. All right, and this now becomes a useful command. Now, the other thing about this is you can explode it and then it becomes individual lines. So when you need a bunch of lines like this, rather than draw one line and then go through the process of, fixing it, it's sometimes a lot quicker to do this. I will say though, if you draw with a polyline and you draw the whole path, whatever it is you want to draw, now the offset command allows you to offset that whole polyline. So you could create your own by doing that with a specific offset. That would be something similar. And up here, once you explode that and it becomes a bunch of little individual lines, you can join them all together. And when you join them all together like this, Ernest, you're joining my Zoom session, right? When you join them all together like this, then each one of those becomes a separate polyline. Make sense? So that's as much as I think you need to know about an M line, but that's how I would go about it. But as far as a strategy, folks, don't underestimate what you know. You know a lot already. Otherwise, Barth wouldn't be getting a job, right? All right, let's go back and look at the rest of it. Is there anything else on the final exam review, folks, that anybody has a question about? Yeah, if you look at most of these, you will have no trouble answering. How does polar tracking work? You learned that at the very first class. You've been using it over and over again. You know how polar tracking works. What object snaps are recommended? Well, the ones that are standard are the ones that are set. The only thing I would do is add midpoint as a running object snap. And you see I've done that over and over again. What you really need for running object snaps is whatever is most useful to you at the time. And there have been times when the most useful running object snap to me is to say, I don't want endpoint, I don't want midpoint, I don't want center, quadrant, intersection, or extension. I want perpendicular and nearest. Now that seems like an odd choice, but if what I want to do is to be able to draw a line from any point here that's 90 degrees to something else, and there are some times when I've done this, I can say I want to draw a line nearest to this one and then perpendicular to this one. Bang, that line now starts wherever I picked it here and it goes perpendicular. So that is something I've used before, but that's very, very specific to a particular drawing, which is why I would now go back and change them all back. And when I change these all back, I like endpoint, midpoint, center comes up all the time. Intersection comes up all the time, extension, and I would not have perpendicular or nearest. I would never have tangent either, because tangent then shows up all the time. I also like quadrant on occasion. So, you can, any combination of those that you indicate would be recommended object snaps. What would not be recommended is parallel or perpendicular, things that you only use once in a while. That makes sense? And that's the difference between running object snaps and other kinds of object snaps. Yeah, you remember how to get the area of a hatch pattern, right? Yeah, you just have to do that. Okay, so here you've got this open the drawing, which is called Kamahana DWG, and it asks you how many of each of the following block references are used, and that's the question you have. You can't see the document on Zoom? It's frozen? No kidding. I'm gonna stop sharing. I haven't heard from anybody, so no. Can you see it now? And if I move it up and down? That's the kind of thing I have no idea about. Somebody who's on Zoom. Maybe I should always have somebody in class on the Zoom call just so people can tell me in class if something goes wrong. Because I used to teach at one, I have one class I teach only on Zoom, right? And so if nobody says anything, or they can't because it's locked up, but I don't know that, I could do a whole class, not a whole class, but I could do a class. You notice I've been asking for feedback. That's probably why something froze on that one too. So thank you. But isn't this your question? How do you find those blocks? All right, let me go ahead and open that up then. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, let's go back and take a look at it. And I'll show you a number of strategies on that. Okay, that's this drawing right here. So I'll download it. And then I'll open it up. And it looks like this. So this drawing here is a landscape drawing. And the landscape drawing has a piece of property. There's a property line right there going all the way around. It's got obviously a lot of blocks, because if I go and hover over any of these, you can see every one of these things is a block, because it has that little thing in the middle. The whole thing can be moved. Also, if I hover over something and wait, it pops up and it tells me it's a block reference, and it even tells me what the name of it is, right? So I could go and just try to pick each one and figure it out, but that wouldn't make much sense because it would take you forever and you'd miss something. If I go into the block edit command though, it's a list of every block in the drawing, right? Doesn't tell me how many have been inserted though, does it? So there are a couple ways to do that. One of them is to say, well, what is the specific block name that they want to know? So how many handy blocks are there? If I go back to the drawing and I go into properties, and in the properties command, I go up here to the upper right-hand corner, there's something called quick select. If I go in here and say, I want to select from the entire drawing all of the block references whose name equals handy. Okay, go back to properties. There are 11 of them. Make sense? Let me do it again. I go back over here and I say, I want to have a new selection set, block references whose name equals arrow. Pick OK, go back over here, and none of them have been inserted, 0. Go back over here, try another one from the entire drawing now, and it says object type, go here to block reference, then down here, based on the name. So if I pick something else like, oh, what do we have? Bunya probably has some. Pick OK. And by the way, it lights them up too. But you don't have to count them. Just go back over to properties. It's going to tell you that it picked 21 of them. Make sense? There is also, and this is just kind of a secret, there's a command called bcount. And bcount says, well, press enter to select all. I press all right now, and then press F2 to see. It's going to give me a listing of every block in the drawing and how many of them were inserted. bcount is a special program that isn't a command in AutoCAD. It's been added as an express tool in AutoCAD. And this wouldn't be a bad idea to talk about express tools. And again, Barth, on the job, it's quite possible that there's some additional tool that was given to you in AutoCAD, but isn't really part of the command that could be very useful to you. And by the way, I'm going to tell Barth and the rest of you the same thing. You run into a problem at work and you're going, I just can't figure this out. Send me an email, give me a call at school, and I'd be happy to help you solve that one. It's really important to me that our students be seen as really good. So if there's something where you just can't quite figure it out, you just let me know. At any rate, express tools are right up here. And there's all kinds of these express tools, some of which are really helpful. One of the ones that people use whenever they really need it is this thing called the arc aligned text. Because there's no way in AutoCAD to say, I want text that just goes along an arc. But you can do that with one of these tools. These tools were written as separate programs by a group of people who said this could be useful, and Autodesk will tell you when you load it, you can use them, but we don't guarantee them. Something goes wrong, it's not our fault. Doesn't work, don't ask us about it. Up to you. Now, I write programs myself, and you saw one of them, the insulation program that I wrote. Didn't come with this. If I were on that team when they put these together, I probably would have suggested it because I think it's a useful tool. But what they have here is things that people have asked for. So there's all kinds of things that you can find here. We don't really cover them in this class because they're not part of the actual software. They're not part of AutoCAD. And none of them work in AutoCAD LT. AutoCAD LT stands for, actually, believe it or not, it stands for latest technology, but it really just means it's a crippled version of AutoCAD. It's AutoCAD Lite. It does not allow you to do three-dimensional drawing, and it doesn't allow you to run programs like this one. So in LT, and here's the other thing, I don't know when people leave here, you're going to be working for somebody that owns AutoCAD or somebody that found out that AutoCAD LT was all they needed and it's a lot less expensive. So we want people to be able to use whatever software they might encounter in the field. AutoCAD LT is very commonly used because instead of being a couple $1,000s a year, it's more like 500. So if you're a company and you go, you know what, we've never once done a three-dimensional model and we never use programs, we only use AutoCAD for two-dimensional drawing, why would you spend $1,500 a year more than you need to over a 10-year period? That gets to be real money, right? So that's how you would approach that one. But again, even if you didn't know that, you know that if you look at the block edit command, it's going to list all the blocks here. The key thing though is figuring out how to find out how many of them there are. And that really comes down to, and you don't have to go through properties to do it. You could just type Q select or even that. And Q select then just opens this box up and allows you to go in and say, well, I want to find out how many lines there are in the drawing. In the entire drawing, give me all the lines that are equal to by layer. That just means that no matter what, by layer is the one that controls. But you can also just say select all. How many lines are in this drawing? I just selected all the lines in the drawing. Once you've selected them, you look at the top, it tells you there are 291 lines in this drawing. Make sense? Okay. Anything else? Well, let's go look at the rest of them and see. Oh, you know, it's a time. Let's take a break. Take a 10-minute break. Okay. You do want a break, don't you, every class? Isn't that kind of helpful? Stop and kind of shake your head. Good. That's why we do it. In fact, we're kind of required to. We're supposed to. If I forget, you let me know, right? So it is 11:05. So at 11:15, we'll pick it back up. And I'm going to see if I can communicate. Thalia and Rue, are you able to hear me and see me and everything is working out, or am I frozen here?
Yes, it is. Everything's
Okay.
working well.
Was the screen sharing, was that frozen to you at some point?
Yeah, but after, oh, me, it was, but I think it was just the connection.
Okay. Yeah, it was a connection here. I had to, Ernest in the class signed in as well, but he's in the classroom and he told me, listen, I can't see what's going on because it's frozen on my computer. So that's when I got out and got back in again. I don't know when that kind of thing happens when I'm working here. It just looks fine to me. So if something doesn't seem right, don't hesitate to interrupt me and say, I can't see what you're doing, or, your screen is not moving, it's frozen, I can't tell what you're doing. Make sense?
Yes.
And Thalia, I can understand why you are muted. Apparently you have a little person with you who is
Yeah.
requiring some attention. So that I
Yeah.
appreciate. Okay. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
I had told him that somebody got a job. I didn't tell him who it was, but if you don't mind, people know, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Now this is probably like I probably had a dozen students get hired in this class before the class was over. The record was somebody was here for the first 2 weeks. They actually gave them a test and hired them because you remember at the beginning, everything you did had to be perfect, right? If you didn't do it, you had to get it back. You had to do it again. And as a result, when you get to the third assignment here, you're already drawing with accuracy. You have that idea. You already understand layers. You already understand how to set them up. You know, those are the kinds of fundamental things that people in the work world want to make sure people can do. So as long as you're learning this and learning it with precision and accuracy, right off the bat, you're developing the right kind of habits that people want to see. So that's why you're in that position right now. And I would, by the way, recommend any one of the people in this room. Absolutely. So if any one of you decides you want to try something out, just let me know. You know what's funny though, Barth? They didn't even call for a reference. Yeah, they just trusted you, I guess. Yes, he really did go to school there. I had one person I ran into outside who complained about our graduates. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, I hired one of your people and he just didn't know what he was doing. And I finally said, well, if you don't mind, who was it? And he told me. I go, yeah, he was in my class for 1 week and dropped it because he didn't like the first grade he got. So he might have told you he went to school here, which wasn't a lie, but he didn't tell you he actually graduated. Why don't you give people a test when you hire them? And so even now, and that's the thing, you know, the reputation that you have as a school really can get damaged in one place with just one person. And that person doesn't even have to be a student who graduated from your program. So that's why I say it's important to me that our students who do get jobs, that they reflect well on us so that down the road, the next Barth gets a chance to, you know, get hired as well. Say that again. The 3DC, the 3D. Oh, Fusion 360. No, we don't teach that. We teach SolidWorks. SolidWorks is a parametric software that's similar. Fusion 360 is a cloud-based parametric modeling program for doing mechanical, but it doesn't get used commercially very often. And as a result, what we teach here is always what businesses in Maine are most likely to be using. So in Maine, actually in the rest of the world, SolidWorks is unique in the sense that if you look at that category of software, it has like 60%, maybe 70% of the use worldwide. Most software doesn't have anywhere near that big a percentage. So when we're looking at a piece of software to teach, Fusion 360 is helpful, it's useful. You can get it for nothing as a student. People like it, but it doesn't get used by most companies. Therefore, we teach what people are most likely to use. The other thing is AutoCAD gets used everywhere. Now there are other programs, DraftSite, and you know there are probably 30 or 40 different clones of AutoCAD, but that's not what people use. So we teach AutoCAD. And Revit, is not quite as overwhelming as SolidWorks is, but it kind of owns the commercial design for commercial architectural design. So those are the three programs we teach. In our 3D class, we do AutoCAD because so many people have AutoCAD, even though it doesn't get used a lot for 3D. But we also in that class do something called 3D Studio Max, and that is the most widely used of the rendering and animation programs that's out there. Our civil class, we teach Civil 3D. It's the only Civil 3D class, a Civil 3D software that gets used very often at all. What's that? Civil 3D. It's AutoCAD Civil 3D. So it's a version of AutoCAD. And that's it. Meredith in one of her classes includes Bluebeam because Bluebeam gets used as a visualization software. Navisworks, we used to bring somebody in to do a Navisworks thing because that gets used quite a lot as well. But we don't really have the resources to do a full-blown class in that. So, we don't do it. So anyway, but Fusion 360 is a perfectly good program. I have tried it, but I don't spend a lot of time with software that I don't teach. A Libra is another one that's like similar to SolidWorks, and that's actually a better program, I think. But and it does get used by a few employers in the area. But again, I bought a copy of it. I was able to get a copy personally for $200 and so I bought it in case I wanted to do some outside work. But I used it; it was fine. But I'm not using it much now. I don't do much outside actual design work. The design work I do is not for profit. It's always, like the ballot boxes and the ventilator fitting and all that stuff. Those are all free things. I do that for the state, for the, main medical center, that kind of thing. And it's kind of nice because I don't have to worry anymore about, gee, I need all these extra jobs. And then I have to worry about where's my priority. So if I did something like what you're doing, and they said, boy, we got a really heavy deadline. What are you going to do? And I go, well, I can't. I've got a class to get ready for. What am I going to do when I weigh those? So my feeling is I want to put my priorities in the class and not in a job like that. All right, we're back. And Ernest, you're going to keep monitoring Zoom for me, right? All right. Let's take a look down through here. I'm going to go through and just ask for every question if anybody has any questions about it. So how to find an area. You're all comfortable with finding a complex area, right? What kind of dimensioning is that? I don't know. We've spent a whole lot of time with that. You know what that dimensioning is called or how to do it? It's called ordinate dimensioning. We deal with that more in the next class, but let me show you what that is. And that's a very common way to dimension. So this right here. Let's say I want to do some dimensioning on here. So I can do dimensioning that's conventional. Conventional dimensioning is dimensioning where you put a dimension on. Now, let me set up a dimension style. I'm going to make a few changes here just so it looks right, but I'm not going to change everything. So conventional dimensioning is the dimensioning where you do things that are linear. So if I say I want a dimension from here to here, comes in, looks like that. If I want to continue it, then I would continue it over to here. So it looks like this. And then if I wanted to do another one, I'd put that in. So, that would be conventional dimensioning. That one would be left out. And then if I want to put an angle on something, I say the angle between here and here. And you've done all this kinds of stuff. What's that? I'm not sharing the screen. That's why we have you here. Okay, I'm going to start paying you as a classroom assistant here. I'm actually not. I'll tell you what I'll pay you in peanut butter cups. I'll give you a peanut butter cup at the end. I don't know if you like peanut butter cups. Anyway, that's just conventional dimensioning. It is very common for certain kinds of things, especially things that look like this. Where you have like a plate, piece of metal, and there's a lot of holes in that plate. And you want to show the location of all those holes. It's very common to do something called ordinate dimensioning. Ordinate dimensioning can be placed with the dim ordinate command. And when you do the dim ordinate command, you pick something and you say, yeah, but it's always based on 0, 0. So that's how far away it is from 0, 0. So it works only if you then change in the coordinate system, the origin of the coordinate system and make the origin there. Now, if I say I want a dim ordinate, pick here and pull it out. Now that's 0. Once that's 0, then I bring this out and that tells me how far in the y-axis that hole is from the base point. So ordinate dimensions are dimensions that are done from a datum point. So every one of those numbers indicates how far away from 0 it is. So that would be the vertical. The horizontal dimensions, like so. So you could do it like that and then go through, and those are called ordinate dimensions. Make sense? However, I'm going to show you a very nice tool because there is a command called QDim, stands for quick dimension. And for QDim, it allows me to say, I want a dimension all of those things. I want the dimensioning to be ordinate, and I want my datum point to be right here. Now I do that and that, and I have all my dimensions in there. Make sense? Ordinate dimensioning, and you can see what it is. Now, when you have a situation like this, where one of them seems to be on top of the other, you just pick it, drag it down, and you get something called the dog leg. So this is a really, really nice way to put in dimensions. And again, it's called ordinate dimensioning. So if you have a question on the exam and the question asks you to identify what, hang on, thank you. To identify what kind of dimensions those are, they're the ordinate dimensions. And the word ordinate is the root word of coordinate. And so it means the coordinates X and Y, and Z can be added as well. So the X coordinate is across the bottom and the Y coordinate is up and down is vertical. Make sense? And if you're asked to open something and put the dimensions on, QDim is a really cool way to do it. Let me just point out, I go back to the QDim command now. Whenever you do something like this, like over here, if you're going to do QDim and you say, yeah, I'm going to pick all of these and all of those, and you bring it over here like that, you notice that's not 0 right now because 0, 0 is over here. So if I were just using with my regular coordinate system over here, before placing them, you have to do this. QDim, you pick your geometry. Up here, you pick the type of dimensioning you want. So you could pick continuous, for instance. If you pick continuous, it's going to line them right up like that. You could also take those dimensions and change them to ordinate. So now they look like that. So continuous is one, ordinate's another, and the other possibility is to do baseline. And to do baseline, that looks like that. Make sense? You see how quick that is. Now, the problem with ordinate, though, if you do ordinate dimensioning, the problem with ordinate is, well, right now, it's not starting at 0, 0. It's starting at how far it is away from the origin of the drawing. So when you do something like this, you've got to start with QDim by getting your geometry. And once you've got the geometry, you have to pick datum point and say, there's where 0 is going to be. Now it's going to establish the datum as 0 in that corner that I picked, and everything else is going to come off of that. Press enter, P for previous, come down here. Now 0 is the starting point, and those dimensions are the distance away from the starting point. Make sense? This is the purpose of a final exam, by the way, is to kind of review things, little new information, and to some extent see what you've already done. So we've talked about this. How many different block names? What's the length of the property line? You all know how to get distances. So the property line in this case is that line right there. There's so many ways to do this. One is you pick it, you go to properties, and under properties, it tells you the length right there. The other thing you can do is pick something, right click and go to quick properties, and quick properties list everything right here. Well, not everything, a number of things, including the length, right? The other thing you can do is the dist command, and the dist command between that point and this point, that's going to tell you the same thing, but you have to be careful because it gives you distances in 3 different ways. The direct distance between the 2 points, then the distance in the X and the distance in the Y. So the distance in the X and the Y is like, what's the distance straight across here? I'm trying to do this without getting a hold of the wrong thing. Yeah, there's the X, there's the Y. So the distance in the XY, that's the X delta distance, and that's the Y delta distance. In other words, how far does it move in the X direction and how far does it move in the Y direction? And when you use the dist command, just be careful. Just be careful that you don't read the wrong number here. Delta X means change in. Delta, the word delta means change. If you ever took a science class, that little triangle is a delta symbol. So, a lot of times in chemistry, a delta T, change in temperature. Delta whatever, delta S, change in speed. So the direct distance is given here, and then the angle here is given. And right now, because this is set up with surveyor's units, the angle is north 87 degrees, 16 minutes, 19 seconds west. So it's almost 90 or close to 90, but it's off by almost 3 degrees. Making sense? Go through the rest of this. I think this is helpful. Say what? Yes, it is if there's no north arrow. Yeah, there's a north arrow right there. The north side of this would be that line right there. Yeah, in other words, if you take a look at this, north, based on you, north, east, west, and south. So if you looked at that, you'd be a little hard pressed to identify that long angled line as north, south, east, or west, because it doesn't really line up with any of them. But if you ask me for the south border, I would consider it the one closest to being horizontal. That would be the east, that would be the west, and the top one would be the north. Okay. You know what an alias is, correct? And I'm giving you a bunch of things saying, what are the alias? Now, here's the thing. What if you don't know what the alias is one of those? You go, then you have to Google it. Just try it out, right? I mean, here's the thing in AutoCAD that I hope you've learned. If I say, well, what is the alias for area? Type the letter A and see what comes up. I don't see area there. Well, AR maybe area. So then type AR and see what comes up. Oh, look, there's area, right? You pick it, area comes up like that. Now, is there an alias for area? Try some things. AA is the alias for area. Okay. Now you try something, you can't figure it out, you Google it. What's the alias? You just go to Google. What is the alias for area? And you're going to do this on your own. The other thing you can use is anything that you've already done for this class. And even if we did that in the class, that's exactly what I would tell you. You have access to all the work you've done in class. So if you're going, gee, he wants me to set this drawing up with layers. I've already set up layers. Oh, I think I'll use Design Center and I'll bring my layers in. That's what I love seeing students do, because then you're working the way you'd work in the field and not just working like you're a student, right? So if I do ask, and I do, you do have to do some drawings and you are going to have to set them up and do the layout and the page layout, the whole thing. If you say, well, I've already made a template, my template, I could start with that. I have all this done. Is that cheating? That's smart, right? That's not cheating at all. That's just being smart. Now, if you made a template, good for you. And by the way, let's suppose you had something like this. Suppose I asked you the area of that, which is the lawn around there. If you want to know the area of that, that's a closed polyline. If I have a closed polyline and pick it and go over to properties, area is one of the things it tells me. That's 18,626.16 square feet. Now, could I also have put a hatch pattern in there? Yes, but sometimes you have to be careful that a hatch pattern covers what you expect it to cover. So if there's things inside that are islands, that might give you a different result than if you pick the outside boundary. Which is why if I really wanted to know the area of that and I didn't want to mess around, I would copy all of the things involved here. Copy all those things, bring them over here, just temporarily. Because then if anything's in the way, I would just delete it, So if that stuff's in the way, just go ahead and delete whatever you don't want. So you come in here and delete that, you come in here and delete this. So if you think any of those things are going to bother you, this is a copy of it. You don't care what happens at the end of it. You're going to throw it away anyway. But you notice now I've got a nice clean version of this. Now I can go and put a hatch pattern in there. And if that's why I like to get the area, pick the hatch pattern, come over, the area is given right there, exactly the same area as the other one. Yes. What was the other one, the PDF? Yeah, I want both. Yeah, here's the reason I want both. I want to make sure you really do know how to plot. And here's the advantage to you when you do it and go, wait a minute, my title block's not there. Now you know you've got a problem you have to fix. So this is really to make sure that you can analyze what you've done, and whatever you give me is as close as possible to being correct. Right? See what I'm saying? Because many times during the semester, people have submitted drawing files. When I go into a preview, the title block's not there because the title block got put on a non-plot layer because the last layer you created was for your viewports. Your viewports on a non-plot layer. Sometimes everything's on a non-plot layer. The viewport's on a non-plot layer, the title block, all the text in there, all that stuff. You would know that immediately if you plotted it or you did a preview. So in the past, what I've said to people is always do a preview, and then it comes in and I give it back to them. I say, I can't see your title block. Now I say, I'm just going to have them do both, because if you make the PDF file and you still submit it, even though you can't see the title block, I'm going to say, why did you do that? You're not going to do that at work. Well, I know you can't see what I just did, but that's just the way it is. They don't like that at work. They want to make sure it's right. So, things like this, dim send, dim center, just try typing them to see what they do if you don't remember. Dim send is something I covered right at the very beginning, and you may well have forgotten a lot of things we've covered. In fact, I'd be shocked if you didn't forget a lot of things we've covered, right? So if you type dim send, for instance, it comes up and it says you need a new value. Well, it doesn't tell you exactly what that does, but that is a variable. That's why it's a value. And the variables that have a dim at the beginning all control the way your dimension style behaves. So, at the very least, what you could do is say, well, let me set dim send equal to something like 1/8 of an inch. Now let's go in here and see what showed up now as 1/8 of an inch. Send sounds like center mark. So you might say, let's go here and go, oh, look, now that's 1/8 of an inch. What does it control? The size of your center mark. Make sense? You also have, of course, Google. If I went to Google and in Google, I said, what is dim send in AutoCAD? It's going to come up and say, dim send is a system variable. What does it do? You pick that and it tells you it controls the size of your center mark. So again, you've got access to all kinds of tools that, believe me, when I was doing drafting, I didn't have access to these things. I had to look in a book. I had to own the book, and it had to be with me when I did the drawing, or I had to remember everything that I had to do, right? Really, there are times looking in the past when, it wouldn't have occurred to me. It didn't occur to me in 1968. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if I could get on a computer and look stuff up? There were computers then, but they were millions of dollars. The idea we'd be carrying a computer around in our pockets never occurred to me back then. And my first computer experience was in 1968. I was programming a mainframe computer when I was in an engineering program. But never once did I go, well, this thing that is the size of a room, someday we'll walk around with it in our hands. I would have said, yeah, right. And someday I'll flap my arms and fly. That would have been the same thing. So, all right, let's go back and take a look at what else we got here. This one right here, you should all just immediately tell me. And this is one of those things where people still have messed up a little bit. And I am going to go over something right now to show you what to do when you do it wrong. But what's the first thing you do when you're going to start an AutoCAD drawing? First decision you have to make. What's that? Any drawing at all. I tell you to do a drawing, the unit. Well, yes, metric or inches, right? So the template you're going to start with. Now that template matters. And one of the things that some of you have figured out, but not everybody, I just did in fact, I made a video about this. What do you do if you start in the wrong units in AutoCAD? Okay. So I want to go over that because I've talked about it before, but one of the problems that people have is they'll make a template that has a bunch of layers in it. And then they'll make a template for something that's metric instead of inches, and they'll copy those layers over. That's fine, except that the line type that you loaded is now going to be the one for the first type that you use. So if I say I want to start a new file, and I use the ACAD DWT, and I come over here and I say I want to make some new layers. So I'll make a bunch of new layers, and I'll call one of them send and one of them hid. And then I'll come over and I'll say, yeah, I want the line type here. And I go over here and load. The minute I load this, it's loading from the ACAD LAN file. ACAD, not ACAD ISO. That means it's inches. Make sense? So I go and load it and say, I want center 2 and I want hid 2. And I collect both of those things and I load them. And I say, okay, for center, it's going to be center 2. Then I come back over here and then say for hidden, it's going to be hidden 2. And now I start a new file. And the new file I start is going to be the ACAD ISO template. And I go, wait a minute, I've already got layers. I'm going to go to AutoCAD Design Center, which I showed you the very first class. You remember that, right? AutoCAD Design Center. And I'm going to go, well, in my open drawings, that last drawing I created had layers in it. I can't remember what that was called now, but it's the last one, drawing 4. Okay, that's drawing 4. Had layers in it, and I'm going to just make those layers part of my drawing that I just started. This is a metric drawing, right? I bring the layers in, say, yeah, that's fine. That'll work just great. We'll just set that as the current layer. And I come over here and I draw a line and I go, yeah, great. It's going to be a center line. I go, well, it's not a center line type. What's wrong with that? That's just weird. And then I zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and I realize it's a center line type, but the segments are tiny. See how little they are? Well, because an 1/8 of a millimeter and a 1/16 of a millimeter is a really small distance. And that's what AutoCAD thinks it has. So even though you can bring the layer in, you still have to go and reload the line types. Make sense? So to reload them, I'm going to go over here to layers, go back here, go to load once again, and this time it's looking in the ACAD ISO, not the ACAD line type file. And so when I come down here and find the same name, I've got to use the same name on this now. Center 2, hidden 2, pick OK, reload all selected, OK. When I type regen, suddenly I can see those line things because now they're based on millimeters and not based on inches. That makes sense? Now there are a few other things that are at issue. Suppose I started this drawing thinking I was in inches, but it's actually started with the template for millimeters. Whatever I draw here, we'll just draw something that's like 10 inches by 5 inches. So I draw something 10 inches by 5 inches. You just came in from Zoom land. So you must live fairly nearby then, right? Yeah. So I drew this thing. It's small, but I go over to a layout and I say in the layout, I want to set up my page setup. And I go over here to modify and I, do the monochrome. I come over here for our class, I'm going to do DWG to PDF. Now, if you're working someplace that has an actual plotter, physical plotter, it's going to be listed here. In this case, we would pick one of them and it would go to a piece of paper. That paper could be as big as 4 feet by 3 feet, right? But in there, because not everybody has that, I'm going to do that. And then I come over here and go, yeah, no, I don't want that paper size. I want the paper size I've always used. I want the ANSI full bleed A. That's great. I come over here and pick that. And then I bring that out here and I go, I know for a fact I can plot this at a 1-to-1 scale. I come in here and I go over there and I say, let's do 1-to-1. And it looks like that. It's because it thinks I'm drawing in metric. So it took that sheet of paper and it made it 25.4 times bigger. So right now, the scale it seems like it would work would be a scale like 10-to-1, but that's not a legitimate scale. I made this thing 10 inches. It should fit on a sheet of paper. So it should be 1-to-1. So what do I do about that? I go over here to Page Setup Manager, modify, take a look and go, oh, wait a minute, look down here, 25.4. It automatically converted because I picked a sheet of paper measured in inches instead of a sheet of paper measured in millimeters. Change that to 1. Now, boy, what's going on? I got a much smaller piece of paper now. Get rid of that. Come in here. put in another viewport. And by the way, the command for making a viewport is mview, as in multi-view. So you don't have to pick something off the layout tab here, which I could do by picking rectangle. I just type MV for multi-view. It comes in like that. Now, if I go and say I want that to be 1-to-1, if I make this big enough, 1-to-1 fits, and I know 1-to-1 makes sense. Make sense? The other issue is if I put a hatch pattern in here, you notice it's a hatch pattern, ANSI 31, but it's like gigantic, right? Based on millimeters, not based on inches. So that hatch pattern, and the only thing I can do about that is go back and start it again with this, with the ACAD DWT instead of the ACAD ISO, or come up here and say, I want to change the scale. Now the scale is 1. I want to change it to 1 divided by 25.4 is basically what I want to do. Now, can I type that in like this? Well, try it. It goes, no, you can't. Well, could I just type in 0.04? Yes, you can type in 0.04. And once you type in 0.04, bingo, now it scales it. 0.04 is really close to 1 divided by 25.4. You divide that as 0.039 something. But for a hatch pattern, that now is close enough. So now your hatch pattern looks good. So if you look at all the things that matter here, if you end up metric, when you wanted to do imperial, the things that come up that matter, layer line types, hatch patterns, the units, when you do the units command, page setup, and primarily sheet size, and then the measurement variable. All of those have to then be alters. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you've got to fix in order to make something into what you wanted if you start with the wrong template. Well, Luke's saying, yeah, you got to pick your units. You got to know when you start what it is you're going to do. It makes it a lot easier. Now, I've never showed you, I didn't show you that initially because I didn't want you fixing problems. I wanted you to start in them correctly. Start it correctly, those problems go away. But now you can see all the things you have to do. Now, units, you know, I have to, oh, the units, they have to be set to inches now. All right, that makes sense. Measurement. Measurement is a variable that determines whether or not you're in an inch drawing or a millimeter drawing. 1 stands for millimeters, 0 stands for inches. Change that when you first get started, and now that will change a lot of things for you. The other thing, by the way, is your dimension style, but that normally you can figure out when you look at it. So your dim style, because right now the dim styles right now are set to isometric, I mean to ISO. Arrowhead size is 2.5. That's great for millimeters, but it's huge for inches. So you'd have to go back and change those things. So you still have to make sure your dimension style is correct. And you can't move a dimension style from a template that's drawn in inches into a template drawn in millimeters without modifying the dimension style because all the values will be wrong. This all makes sense to people? All right, go back and see what else is going to come up. How would I know? I mean, how would I know if I open a drawing what it is? I go and open any drawing. I open this drawing right here. What units were used? Well, if I type units, it tells me architectural, that's inches, right? So I know that's imperial. If I look at the measurement value, measurement variable, the measurement variable is either going to be 0 or 1. It's 0, that's inches. I go over to the layout, and in the layout, I right click, go to page setup manager, modify, and then I set up a page. If I set up a page over here and I do the DWG to PDF and I use a size, it doesn't change that to 1 to 25.4. Any one of those is going to tell me that this drawing was done in inches. It's an imperial drawing. It wasn't done in millimeters. Make sense? This has to do with the scale for the sheet. So you notice if I draw something, what I really would have said here is what should the scale be in Page Setup Manager for a drawing with a sheet size of A size or other inches. In other words, when you have a sheet size that's measured in inches and you're in an imperial drawing, it's a 1-to-1 scale. If you come down here, do the same thing. For a drawing, sheet size of A size or other inches. In this case, because you're trying to put the drawing, even though it's a metric drawing, you're trying to put it on a sheet of paper measured in inches, it's 1 to 25.4. And 25.4 is the magic number. That's exactly how many millimeters there are in 1 inch. That's why it gets used all the time. The @ symbol means last point entered. You can use that all the time. Down here, you see an absolute, a relative coordinate, absolute. Yeah, this is a matching thing. So I'm giving you 4 examples here. Which one is relative? Which one's absolute? Which one's polar? Which one's relative polar? Now, if you take a look, anything that has an @ symbol is a relative coordinate entry. It's relative to the last point you entered. It doesn't start on the coordinate system with 0, 0 in the lower left-hand corner. So what that just means is this: when we did this drawing right here, and I started it, I said start someplace, but then I needed the @ symbol for the next point because I wanted to indicate from that point how far it was and at what angle. If I didn't type the @ symbol, if I just typed 110 at an angle of, I'll just do north 90 degrees west. It's like, where did that go? It went all the way over to this point right here, which from 0, 0 is 110 at an angle of. That makes sense? So the @ symbol just means, no, don't start from 0, 0. This is not absolute. Start from the last point that I entered. Now, the other thing about that is if I pick a point here, so I'm going to draw a circle and I give it a size. If I press the enter key and it asks me for the center, if I type just the @ symbol, it also means last point. That's how I can draw concentric circles. So I can make that 20. I can make that 40. So the @ symbol means literally from the last point entered. And if you do it all by itself, it's just whatever the last point you picked was, whatever that is. In fact, if there's an object snap, if I wanted to draw something 10 feet away from that point right there, if I go to my circle command, shift right click and say from, it's going to say pick a point. Now, what's the offset from that point? Internally, it's making that the last point I entered. So if I say 10 at an angle of 0, it'll start from, yeah, it won't put the @ symbol in, it starts from 0. But if I do the same thing with the from object snap and type @10 at an angle of 0, now it moves over from the point that I picked. Make sense? I am actually gonna end this class about 5 minutes early because I have a meeting right at noon that I have to go and get onto. So let me go through the rest of this and see if there's anything else. Line weight, the line weight stuff, you know, for sure. When it says reproduce the sample shown for sample output, I mean, really what that's saying is if you go into AutoCAD and type units, sample output is over here. So if you pick something like decimal degrees, the sample output shows right over here. See where it says sample output? So if I say I want to do this in gradients, it'll give me an example of what it would look like. If I say I don't want architectural units, I want decimal. If I say I don't want decimal units, I want fractional. That shows me what the output would look like if I make those changes. That's what that question is asking. This one, you ought to be able to trim stuff. That's all that is. Getting an area, you know what that is. The scale command, let me go over the scale command again. We've done the scale command a couple of times, but people still have a little trouble with it sometimes. So let me pick a drawing here. Let's take this one. All right, so here's something right there. Suppose I want to scale that. If I say I want you to scale that 120% of what it currently is, 120% equals 1.2 times. In other words, 120% of something means it's the same size it was plus an additional 20%. And how would I know? Well, how would I do that? I'd multiply by 1.2. I would not multiply by 120. 120 times bigger is not 120%. It's 1200%, right? So if I come over here and I say, I want you to scale that, I go and scale this whole thing. You have to pick a base point. If I now say, I want you to scale that 1.2 times, you do that, it gets 20% bigger, all the dimensions change. But there's something else. Suppose I go, you know what? That number's wrong. I want the length of that to be 4. I go to scale, pick all my objects, and this is where understanding AutoCAD having options, you look up there and you've got copy and reference. I'm going to type R for reference. Reference length. So the reference length is the distance from here to here. I want it to be 4. Now it's 4. So I scaled something from a known value to the value I wanted. Now, normally, I don't really know what that value is. So picking the 2 points to let AutoCAD do the math is the most accurate way to do it. Because I said before, that says 3.36. However, if I increase the precision of that, and I make the precision go up like this, that's exactly 3.36, but it might not be. It might be 3.6247 or whatever. So when I say I'm going to pick the 2 numbers and I go to scale, pick my base point, reference, let's just do this one over here. Let's say I want that to be not 1.97. I want that to be 2. Now it's 2. Before, I might have thought it was 1.97, but this one I think will, but it's not. It's 1.968. So if I use 1.97 and did the math myself, I would be wrong. If I let AutoCAD determine it by picking the 2 points, it's going to be correct. So far, so good. We've got 5 minutes. Let's see if there's anything else here. This is what kind of section is that? What kind of material is that? I covered that in class. You can look that up if you need to. There is one thing here though. This part right here, that's a circular part. You can tell because it has a center line here. Down here, you've got 4 different versions of what that would look like. And what I'm telling you is, yeah, any one of these, if you did a full section, it would look like that. For most of these though, the full section would not actually look like that. If I were to draw a line that went right down through here, it wouldn't go through the holes. You see that? If I did it here, wouldn't go through the holes. If I did it here, it would go through the holes. If I did it here, it wouldn't go through the holes. But in every case, the convention is you pretend it went through the holes because it's easier to understand what you're looking at. But there's only one of these that's the actual true representation, and that's this one right here. How many views on this one? You can make a decision on that. M line. What command was used to get the following information? Yeah. Okay, well, here's the thing you've got to do. The 3 island displays. Let's go to AutoCAD and how would you figure that out? Let's go in here. Let's say I want to do a hatch pattern. I go to hatch. Okay, it comes up here and I look up here and I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of things up here, but I don't see anything about islands. I do have an options thing here though. Outer island detection. That sounds like maybe what I'm after. I go here, I've got normal, outer, ignore, no. Now, if I say normal and I pick this, it does that. By the way, join will allow me to put together into one polyline a bunch of lines that are connected to each other. So if you go to the hatch command and you look around, anything that has a little arrow on it is going to have a drop down And under options, for instance, it's going to give you some options. So outer hatch detection, if you look at this, the normal island detection looks like this. So that's how it would hatch. If you look at the under options and say ignore island detection, now it goes right over anything that's in the middle. Make sense? And then the last one would be the one that is most likely to be what you want, which is outer island detection, where it would look like that. So you have a choice when you're putting a hatch in for what happens to the parts that are inside. That's what it means. But again, you can answer any of these questions by opening AutoCAD and taking a look at what the options are when you get in there. You can draw that, I know, and you can plot stuff. Everybody here, everybody in the class, everybody all of you have been doing drawings, setting up layouts, the whole thing. There's no problem with you doing that. I can't imagine that you need any help with that one. And then these are things that if you've forgotten, I mean, this one you should know this one. There's 25.4 millimeters in an inch. That's just one of those things where if you work in a technical field, you should just know that because that's one of the things you're going to have to do periodically. But then A size paper, we covered that. B size paper, we covered that. You don't remember? Look it up. You've got a technical graphics standards that you have available to you. Line weights, again, there's all kinds of handouts that I gave you that cover these kinds of things. Text height, those are all things you should know. And if you don't remember, you can look up. The spacing we covered. What do the arrows mean on a cutting plane line? Arrowhead size should be the same as text height. So when you ask you for arrowhead size in millimeters, it should be 2.5 to 3. And with inches, it should be 0.1 to 0.12. So whatever your text height is, that's what the arrowhead size should be. This one, you just have to identify line types, and that I think you can do easily. And again, if you've forgotten, then you can go and look it up. Here, creating this shape, that right there would be created with a circle, tangent, radius command, not with a fillet command. It wouldn't work. If it was inside, it'd be the fillet command. This one Sarah asked about earlier. And when you do that, it says create the shape. If I created this shape and I said there's a circle here and a circle here, and now I use the circle tangent, radius is one of the options, and say make it tangent to this, tangent to that, and then give it whatever radius you want, it's going to do that. Now, what's the distance between the tangencies? Dist is the command. That intersection to that intersection, 45 feet, 7.5 inches. Make sense? That's the whole exam. Now, you will not get this exam, and you might actually get some of the same questions. Most of them will be different questions, but you might get some of the same questions. But this is the kind of stuff I'm going to be checking to see if you know what to do. When you draw something that has hidden features, did you use hidden lines? Did you set up your layers? Do you have layers that are hidden, layers that are, and again, if you made a template and that template has everything you need, because you're gonna have to put dimensions as well, use your template. In other words, do this, be smart when you do this. I'm not gonna open it till next week. I will be here next week. And if you wanna come in while I'm here to take the exam, then you're welcome to do that. I'm just gonna be sitting in the room with the Zoom and be open. And that way, if you're going, I don't understand what you're asking for in this question. If there's a question of the wording, I mean, not everybody in my classes grew up speaking English, and that means sometimes I say something that doesn't make sense, right? I mean, Ernest is saying, yes, it happens all the time. So I don't want you answering a question incorrectly because you don't understand what I'm asking, which is why I want to be available for anything that you're confused by. So, like Anton said, what do you mean by the north side? Well, I thought that was obvious, but it's not. If it's not obvious, then I want to be able to say, this is what I mean. So you're actually answering the question and not being confused by something and not answering this, answering a different question, in other words. Sometimes I can understand that based on the answers, and just sometimes I can't. So all set, folks? It's been a fantastic semester with you folks. It really has. I've been really enjoyed this. This is not meant to ask for anything particular, but I want to point out one thing that I forgot to do at the very beginning. I made an announcement of this. No, I want to save and close. I made an announcement of this, but we have been really encouraged by administration to get people to evaluate our classes, as many people as possible. And I traditionally have did I put it here? No. I traditionally have an evaluation rate of about 20 or 30%. Most of the people in the class don't evaluate the class. So I decided to give you an incentive to evaluate the class, which I can't. And by the way, you can evaluate the class and say I was the worst instructor you ever had. I don't know who you are. All I'm going to do is see the results. But I put an additional assignment in here. Evaluate the class. Tell me you did it. I'll give you 10 points. That's all you got to do. Okay. Now, somebody asked me, how do you know for sure somebody did it? I could have you copy it and then paste it, but then you show me what you evaluated, and that's not what the idea is. All you've got to do is tell me you did it, and I just trust that you did it. If after this I go and check, because they'll tell me how many people in the class did evaluate it. If 20 people said they did it and only 10 people actually did it, then I'll stop doing this. But I'm willing at this point just to trust if you tell me you did it, you did it. I would love to have you make any comments you have that would help me make the class better. So if you're thinking, boy, that would be really, it would have been helpful to do this, it would have been whatever, I didn't like the way this was done. Any of those things at all, I read all those comments, but again, I have no idea who made them. They're all anonymous, and the other ones are just, pick like numbers and stuff like that. All right, that makes sense? Okay, I gotta run because I gotta get in there and get on that call. Because this class is so interesting, I have either been late for or missed every department meeting so far this semester. I get in there late or I forget it altogether because we're talking in here about something else. And we have a really important meeting right now, and I don't want my colleagues to think that I don't consider them as important as you, but I don't. Don't tell them. Just don't. Say what?